You spend enormous amounts of energy managing what other people think of you. And Chuang Tzu watched people do this 2,000 years ago and called it the funniest tragedy he had ever seen. In ancient China, during a period when competing kingdoms made political survival genuinely dangerous and philosophers jockeyed for influence, at the courts of powerful rulers, Chuang Tzu wrote stories. Strange ones, stories about cooks and carpenters and talking fish, stories where the punchline was usually that the person who seemed foolish was actually free, and the person who seemed successful was actually in a cage of their own construction. He was offered a position of great political power once. A messenger came from a prince who wanted him to serve as a chief minister. Chuang Tzu was fishing at the time. He listened to the offer. Then he pointed at a turtle in the mud by the river and said something that made no sense to the messenger at all. The problem in his world was visible and specific. Prestige in ancient China was not just pleasant to have, it was tied to survival, to resources, to how you were treated by people with power over you. The educated class competed intensely for reputation. Every word in public was calculated. Every relationship was managed. Being seen as wise and virtuous and well-connected was the currency you spent to stay safe and advance. People exhausted themselves performing a version of themselves they thought the important people around them wanted to see. They became expert readers of rooms and terrible readers of themselves. We call it personal branding now, or managing your image, or just being strategic about what you share. Same mechanism, different clothes. Sound familiar? So what did Chuang Tzu actually believe that made him capable of turning down the kind of offer most people in his position would have fought years to receive? Back to the turtle by the river. He pointed at it and asked the messenger, "Do you think that turtle would rather be dead and have its shell displayed in a temple as a sacred object, or alive and dragging its tail through the mud?" The messenger said, "Alive in the mud, obviously." Chuang Tzu said, "Then go away. I will keep dragging my tail through the mud." This is not the story of someone who didn't care about his life or his circumstances. It is the story of someone who had gotten very clear on what the cost of a certain kind of success actually was. The turtle in the temple was honored, preserved, consulted. It was also dead. The turtle in the mud was obscure, messy, overlooked. It was also free. He kept coming back to one central observation throughout all his writing. Most human suffering is not caused by actual hardship. It's caused by caring deeply about how you appear in the eyes of people whose opinions you have made into a kind of invisible authority over your life. Think about that mechanism for a moment. You give someone authority over how you feel about yourself, often without them asking for it, often without them even knowing you've done it. And then you spend enormous energy trying to perform in a way that earns their approval, which shifts constantly, which is never fully secure, which requires more maintenance the more you pursue it. Chuang Tzu watched this and called it voluntary imprisonment. The bars are made of other people's imagined judgments, and you built the cell yourself. His alternative was not indifference to other humans. That's the most common misreading of him. He loved people. He grieved when his wife died, genuinely and deeply. He cared about the quality of his relationships. What he didn't do was outsource his sense of himself to what those people thought of him. Those are entirely different things. The useful distinction he kept drawing was between responding to what is actually happening versus responding to your constructed image of how you are being perceived. One is engagement with reality. The other is a hall of mirrors you've built in your own mind and then gotten lost inside. He told a story about a man who dreamed he was a butterfly, fluttering freely with no thought of being a man at all. Then he woke up and found himself a man again. And the question he asked was genuinely unsettling. Is he a man who dreamed of being a butterfly, or a butterfly now dreaming he is a man? Most people hear that as a riddle about identity. What he was actually pointing at was how completely we become absorbed in whatever role we recurrently playing. How we forget that the role is something we put on rather than something we are. The man so worried about his reputation has forgotten he is not his reputation. He has become the role so completely that the idea of setting it down, even for an afternoon, feels like a kind of death. Chuang Tzu would say that's the dream you need to wake up from. Here's how this sits inside your actual daily life. You edit what you say based on who's in the room. Not for tact or kindness, which are real virtues, but from fear of being judged a certain way. You scroll through other people's lives and feel a vague sense of inadequacy that has nothing to do with your actual circumstances and everything. With an involuntary comparison you didn't choose to make. You say yes to things that cost you real time and energy, because saying no would risk someone thinking less of you. And somehow that imagined judgment feels more threatening than the actual concrete cost you're paying. None of this is weakness or stupidity. It's the result of a mind doing what it was trained to do, which is track social standing. Because for most of human history, social standing and survival were the same thing. The training runs deep. Chuang Tzu knew this. His prescription was not to stop caring about people. It was to notice when you've handed authority over your inner life to something outside yourself, and to take that authority back, quietly, without drama. Not as a declaration of independence, but as a simple, private recalibration. The practical version of this is smaller than people expect. The next time you catch yourself editing what you actually think in order to say what you believe will be well received, just notice it. Don't correct it immediately. Don't perform authenticity as a different kind of image management. Just notice that the editing is happening, and ask, whose voice am I afraid of right now? Name the person or group specifically. What do I think they'll think? And then ask, what would I actually say if I weren't managing that? You don't have to say it out loud. You don't have to stop being strategic about how you communicate. But knowing what you actually think, before the editing process runs, keeps you from losing access to yourself entirely. He fished by the river instead of managing a kingdom. The messenger thought he was wasting himself. Chuang Tzu thought the messenger was the one who had lost something, without knowing it was gone. The approval you've been working for was never going to give you what you thought it would. It never does. The question is how long you want to keep finding that out, the expensive way. Subscribe if this is the kind of thinking you want more of. The next video goes somewhere just as